There's no doubt that Superman will go down as one of the strongest heroes in DC's universe, and even maybe any superhero universe. He's taken on gods, defeated Kryptonians just like him, and saved a number of planets. So yeah, he isn't just Earth's mightiest hero, he's DC's mightiest hero. But since DC Comics published the Death of Superman story arc back in 1992 that saw DC's most powerful fall at the hands of Doomsday, mean fella by the way, the topic of what can hurt and probably even kill the Man of Steel became an even more interesting one. He's quite powerful, but he's no immortal. We're all aware of Superman's ultimate and consistent Achilles heel, the green kryptonite, but besides that, there are still weapons in the DC universe that Clark Kent wouldn't stand a chance against. And you might be shocked to hear that there are a lot of them too. So, join us as we run through the 10 most interesting weapons that could hurt the Man of Steel, besides the green kryptonite, obviously. Gear up, because this is going to be one fun countdown. 10. Trident of Neptune. Starting off at number 10 is the all-powerful Trident of Neptune. We all know the Trident of Neptune, right? But you probably weren't expecting to see this on here. That's cool though, but just hear us out. What do we know about Atlan's Trident? It's a weapon that grants whoever wields it great power and the divine right to rule the sea and everyone or thing that dwells within it. The original Trident of Neptune was forged by the Cyclops, and no, not Teen Titans Justice League Cyclops, the mythical Greek creatures with one eye. You know, them. Well, the Trident was forged by them out of adamantine and Neptune's essence. It can conjure and manipulate water as well as fire lightning bolts. It's also imbued with elements so durable that it will cut through Superman's skin. Besides that, it's also magic, and we all know Clark is often vulnerable to magic. So, theoretically, Atlan's Trident would do a lot of damage to the Kryptonian. Number 9. Blue Beetle Scarab. The Scarab, or Kajida as it's often called, has advanced technology on its side. Yeah, it bonded with Jamie Reyes to give him a sleek suit, but it does way more than that. The Scarabs, yeah, there are more than one, were genetically engineered by a civilization of alien conquerors called the Reach. Well, the Reach had to devise more sustainable methods of conquest that would allow them to conquer worlds with everyone being none the wiser, which led to the invention of the Scarabs. Well, enough with the history lesson. The Scarab is quite useful in battle, and here's how. It can analyze any situation to discover its opponent's weakness. So basically, it has enough tech to adapt to any battle. Now, imagine it in a fight with Superman. It could easily analyze Clark and devise a weapon that would destroy him in minutes. Number 8. The Sword of Superman. Here's a jaw-dropping history lesson for you. Did you know that Superman had a weapon for battle? A sword, to be exact. Yep, the Man of Steel once had a sword. And number 8 on our list is the Sword of Superman. The sword is one really old and obscure object, which according to DC Comics is as old as the universe. When matter first congealed from plasma, one certain cruciform lump traveled, slowly morphing through space and time until it was forged into a sword, with Superman's S symbol born on its hilt. Yeah, the origin sounds bogus, but it's one powerful weapon. Well, Superman was the only one able to wield this powerful sword, but it gave him way too much strength. More than he knew what to do with. It kinda made him a god. Understanding what that kind of power could do to him, Clark decided to leave the sword behind, and he hasn't been seen with it ever since. The Sword of Superman isn't the kind of weapon that would hurt the Man of Steel physically, but think of what it could do to him mentally, stripping him of everything that made him Earth's signal of hope. All that power will just turn him into an evil deity. Number 7. Claw of Horus. Still on ancient weapons, that takes us to the 7th weapon on our list, the Claw of Horus. This is also a pretty obscure weapon. It was forged by Nabu the Wise from nth metal, recovered from a fallen Thanagarian spaceship. To show you just how powerful this bad boy is, it was once used to return the first Flash, Jason Garrick, to the present. The Claw has all sorts of unfathomable powers, and unlike previous weapons, we've seen this one work against the Man of Steel. In a battle with Superman, Hawkman managed to get the upper hand, which we can all agree is a near impossible feat. The Claw draws its power from the Earth's magnetic core, so that explains the reason for its powers. Number 6. Lex Luthor's Mech suit. Sometimes you don't need alien tech or ancient weapons to take on the Kryptonian. Sometimes all you need is your smarts. A feat that Lex Luthor has proven time and time again. And this takes us to the 6th weapon on our list, Lex Luthor's mech suit. Lex remains Clark's greatest foe, primarily because of his brain. Lex knows he can't face Superman all by himself unless he has some kind of a death wish, so he created the mech suit. The original mech suit was a LexCorp prototype that old Baldy used to even the playing field. While Superman often comes out on top against Lex's mech suit, he continues to make upgrades just so he can match the Man of Steel. In fact, he even obtained a mother box and used that to make the mech suit more powerful. What's even scarier about the mech suit is that it's also quite effective against many superheroes other than the Man of Steel. Number 5. Justice Buster. Yeah, Lex's sweet mech suit must be pretty impressive, but he isn't the only DC character with one. If there's anyone else that should also have a giant metal suit made specifically for Superman, who would that be? Yep, none other than the Dark Knight himself. At number 5 on our list of Superman-proof weapons is the Justice Buster. The Justice Buster first made its appearance in 2014's Batman Endgame comic book story arc. Well, in that comic book series, Joker uses some weird virus to wipe the minds of the entire Justice League. Batman was then forced to put them down using, as you've probably guessed by now, the Justice Buster. Hence the name Justice Buster and not Superman Buster. You get it? And it worked quite effectively too, putting down Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and the Flash. You're probably wondering, what about Superman? Well, the Justice Buster didn't put the Man of Steel down, but it matched him like for like. That, folks, is what the Batman can do. And hey, maybe if you'd like to know more about how this story goes, do like and subscribe, and just maybe you'll get the full scoop on what happened. Number 4, God Killer. Do you know that Deathstroke had hurt Superman? Like, really hurt him? Yeah, allow us to wipe off that face of disbelief, would you? At number 4 is the God Killer. Even its name sounds frightening. The God Killer is a blade forged by Hephaestus specifically for killing gods. Yeah, the name kind of gave that one away. Well, after assassinating Lepidus, a Greek titan and old foe of Olympus, Hephaestus made Deathstroke, a lethal assassin, even more lethal by gifting him the God Killer. The blade holds so many different powerful attributes, although its basic function is the slaying of immortals. You can even say this bad boy has a mind of its own, as it's capable of changing its size and form to adapt in any fight. As mentioned earlier, Superman is vulnerable to magic, and the God Killer is definitely a magical weapon. So we all know what this implies for the Man of Steel. Plus, the blade can also absorb any attack, including Superman's, and send it back with twice as much power. Number 3, the Sword of Athena. We haven't left the realm of mythical blades, and that takes us to our number 3 Superman-proof weapon, the Sword of Athena. Not much introduction required on this front, but for non-comic book fans watching this, the Sword of Athena is Wonder Woman's beloved blade, which we've all seen her use countless times against the strongest of foes. Fortunately enough for fans, we've seen this in action against Superman. And unfortunately for the Man of Steel, it did do damage to his supposedly indestructible skin. Sorry, Clark. In the 1996 Kingdom Come storyline, the Sword of Athena proved sharp enough to hurt Superman. Besides that, the blade is also powerful enough to destroy other gods. So, going through Superman and maybe even killing him is looking like a no-brainer, guys. Number 2, Helmet of Fate. Well, now we're in the top 2. There have been some really powerful top-tier weapons throughout the course of this video. You have to be wondering, what could possibly top those? Well, maybe the Helmet of Fate would, and that takes us to our number 2 spot. The Helmet of Fate is literally all-powerful. It was created by the Lord Order of Nabu as a depository for his infinite mystical powers. And yeah, his powers are definitely infinite. There's no telling what he can do. The Helmet of Fate holds Nabu's spirit, turning whoever wears it into Dr. Fate, the Master Sorcerer. Dr. Fate is arguably the number 1 magic user in the DC comic book universe, so you just know the Helmet of Fate is one of the most effective weapons against the Man of Steel. In a fight with the Kryptonian, all you'd have to do is put it on and quickly get it over with, easy peasy. Or you could even put it on Superman himself and just watch as Nabu takes over his consciousness. Either way, it's a win for you. Number 1, Spear of Destiny. And finally, our number 1 spot. What weapon could possibly be more powerful than Nabu's helmet? Well, how about a weapon of Christian theology? Yeah, that look of disbelief is definitely priceless. The most powerful Superman weapon in DC comic book history is the Spear of Destiny. Even the name is cool. This spear wasn't created by any gods or mythical creatures. The Spear of Destiny is the spear that pierced Jesus Christ while he hung on the cross. So yeah, the DC Universe and Christian theology have something in common, shockingly. Well, the spear has supernatural powers which allow its wielder to control the minds of superpowered individuals. It was used mainly by Adolf Hitler during World War II to keep American superheroes away. This kind of weapon would make light work of a fight with Superman. With it, you could easily just turn him into your puppet. What more could anyone ask for? Hopefully, this video doesn't make you guys look down on Superman. None of this changes the fact that he's still DC's most powerful superhero. Only difference is that at least now, he isn't totally invulnerable.